All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another week of Page from my book. I have been able to listen to so many episodes because this season has not disappointed whatsoever. And we're not going to start today because I genuinely have one of my friends that I highly, highly respect because he just brings truth and knowledge and fun. And so you kind of heard about him in the intro, but y'all know the deal. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to all of you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and keep the party going.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Brian Packer. My friends call me BPAC, so Allie, of course, can always call me BPAC because we go way back. I'm a native Chicagoan, have lived here most of my life, other than, the brief period when I went away to college. And I work in public relations and marketing. I've been doing that for a long time. I'm a father, I'm a husband, a brother, fraternity brother, uh, Morehouse brother, uh, avid hip hop fan, avid fan of my four H's, which I call hip hop, HBCUs, hot wings, and superheroes. So that's me.
I love that. I feel like you need to trademark those 4 H's. That was dope. And clearly y'all see why he's on the podcast. I mean, need I say more? So Pac, thank you so much for being on this episode today. It has been really, really powerful for me to be able to listen to all the guests thus far about their story that in life, some things you just don't see coming. I don't know what that is for you, but I'm super excited to dig into what that was for you. So without further ado, let's jump in. What was that moment or moments that you just didn't see coming?
So when you sent me the outline and the topic for this, I really wanted to try to figure out if there was something like deep and esoteric that was outside of the obvious of the I didn't see it coming, because I have a very obvious I didn't see it coming story. And I tried to be like, oh, that's so cliche. But then I guess I thought about it, and I guess most people, and probably most people listening who don't know me, won't know that story. So I guess I'll share it. And so the I didn't see it coming story for me, obviously, is me becoming a father.
Mm.
So I have a daughter. She's Clark. You know her. A lot of people know her. She's a superstar. And she is 12 going on 13. And I had her when I was 26 years old. So you can kind of do the math there and figure out how old I am now. And I had 30 days to become a father. So I found out I was becoming a father on August 31st, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Clark was born October 3rd, 2009. So it was definitely I did not see that coming story.
Mm-hmm.
It was, you hear stories about people having like the miracle births, and I didn't know I was pregnant and those types of things. And you're like, that can't happen in real life. And it happened to me. And it's been one of the greatest blessings of my life. It's been one of the most, endearing things that I've been able to really center my life and my love and my knowledge and all these things around. But it definitely was a oh shit, it was
Right.
just one of those moments. It was because I wasn't, I was 26, and I think at the time I was just hitting my stride in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, I got my first real job. And so I'm like, oh, I'm making a little bit of money now. And so I can go out and pay bills. And I bought a car. And, so I was hitting my stride, and I was like, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Because I was a little bit of not a late bloomer in college, but I think I just spent more of college being reserved
Mm-hmm.
and just being kind of in the bubble of college and not really expanding into the world and really getting out there. And so I had a chance to do that a little bit later, kind of post college. And when I was hitting that stride of doing those things, it's like, nope, here
Mm-hmm.
comes a child, which was, a shock to my system. It was something that, even in the first year of her life, there was probably only a handful of people that really knew I had a child, because it was an immediate situation, and it was crazy. So I think on top of that, though, in terms of I didn't see that coming. So Clark was born in October of 2009. At the time, again, no one really knew. My family knew, my immediate friends knew, but Facebook didn't know.
Right.
The world didn't know. And she was born October 29, January of 2010, I got fired from my job.
Mm.
So, like,
Didn't see
you
that.
go from 6 months ago, I was like this, like, bachelor, like, young in the city, like, just ready to kind of take on the world. And then immediately go from, okay, now you have a like true responsibility. And then the means in terms of how you can provide for that responsibility has now been like taken away or like you've lost it, whatever.
Right.
Um, and it's interesting because I reflect back on that period now, and I think about, particularly with the job piece, I think about like, oh, was there something that I did wrong or something that I
Mhm.
wasn't doing? And I always kind of attributed that, they give you kind of your exit interview. And I always attributed that to, I didn't work hard enough or I didn't do something right or I wasn't just, and now that I think back on it, I'm like, nah, that probably had absolutely nothing to do with me
Mhm. Mhm.
and was, just based upon the situation for whatever season and reason that happened. But anyways, like, so that like period of time was probably the most like, I don't know what to do here.
Right.
And I'm not equipped with like, because one, I never had a child before,
Right. Right.
and two, I'd never been fired from a job. So, I like to think that I grew up being kind of a high achiever. Like,
Mhm.
I wasn't always like number one in the class, but it was always
Right.
like somewhere in that upper half. So it
Mhm.
was like
Mhm.
I've always kind of like achieved. I've always like gotten the things that I put my mind forward to. And so when those things went kind of off the rails, it wasn't part of like this script that I thought my life was going to be.
Right.
um, it was just a real shock to my system, and it really like shifted my mindset in terms of just how I look at everything. I mean, obviously with a child, like responsibility became like the number one thing in my head because I'm like, I now have to provide for this person. Like this
Mhm.
person
Mhm.
relies on me to like eat and
Right.
get out and have access to things. So it really changed my life, I think. And I know it's kind of cliche because people say that like children will change their lives and things like that, but it really did. It really
Yeah.
changed who I was kind of fundamentally as a person. And I think over time it's taught me so many things. It's taught me so much about myself. It's taught me so
Mhm.
much about what I value. It's taught me a lot about how I interact with people. It's
Mhm.
taught me a lot about how I interact with women
Mhm.
because having a girl, being responsible for, and my daughter lives in another state, so I parent her kind of long distance. So even like understanding that dynamic, how do you still stay involved with someone who's not in front of you every day? was a it was different.
Mhm.
It pushed me to the limits. It made me think about things in ways I never thought about. And it made me a different person. So that's essentially the story. I mean, there's
Yeah.
obviously like 13 years of
Yeah.
aligned to that, but like that was the catalyst. That was like the first moment. Because like I said, the combination of not being prepared for a child and then like not having a job and figuring
Mhm.
out like I got to figure this out,
Yeah.
and I got to figure it out not just for me, but I got to figure it out for someone else.
Yeah.
Was the big change.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, no matter how much we plan for something, we obviously have these moments. And I think one of the things that these moments bring is this. Well, let me say the moments don't bring it, but the person decides it. It's like this switch for your grit to turn on. I'm like, okay, so what do I have? What am I going to work with? How am I going to allow this to affect me? How am I going to move forward? And when things happen that are massively impactful, like, yeah, there's varying degrees that are relative to the person, but definitely I imagine a child coming in and, like a new shift on like, okay, so that was something. And now I'm processing something else that I thought was kind of rooted, shifting. Um, can you share a little bit about like when that switch went on to grit? Like, okay, this is where I am. What did that do for you? And kind of, if you can recall, like, what made you just go, okay, this is what I got to do, and what were the tools you did to kind of move forward?
So a couple things. I think when I first, like, my initial gut reaction when I first found out that Clark was
Hmm.
coming was it was rooted. I'll tell. I can say this. Like, there was a certain amount of selfishness that was rooted in it because I was so hung up in the fact that like, oh, now I'm a statistic
Mm,
because I was unmarried and, I was a, young Black man. And we hear so many stories about Black family dynamics, the
mm-hmm.
role of Black fathers in their kids' lives. And so I never wanted to be that. Right. And
Right.
so I always kind of prided myself on being like, I'm going to be like this upstanding Black man. Like I went to Morehouse. And so like all of the like rhetoric that goes along with that, I
Mm-hmm.
thought like that's going to be my life. And
Right.
so when I have a child out of wedlock, I'm like, oh, I'm a statistic now. I'm just like another dude out here making babies. And so that one part was like something that I had to get over because I knew that eventually it clicked in like it wasn't about that.
Right. Right.
And it was about that like you've brought a life into this world and it's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful life. And now you have a responsibility. And I think the other thing when you talk about the grit is I think about my own upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I grew up with both parents. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was, relatively young, middle school age, but I still had both of them in my life. Like I
Right.
still knew my father, still knew my mother. I had a childhood that like for the most part I enjoyed. Like I had good memories of like being a kid, playing outside, like going to summer camp, like having gone on vacation. So all of those
Yeah.
things that I knew that I was afforded, I was like, I owe it to my offspring to give them that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if
Yeah.
nothing else, I owe that to them because it was afforded to me. And so I think we think about how our parents work so hard because our parents want us to do better than they did.
Yes.
And like when you have a child, like it makes sense. It immediately makes sense. It's just like, I want you to have everything that I didn't have. And I had so much. So it's like, how do I top that? How do I top like a great childhood that I had where like my parents put me in camps and gave me access to
Mm-hmm.
things and I went to special programs and got accepted into gifted programs. It's like, well, my kid has got to do
Right.
double that. Like if I was in a gifted program, they've got to be in like NASA. They got to go to space because
Right.
it was so the grit really came from just like again that sense of it's like reverence almost like reverence
Mm-hmm.
for like everyone that came before you who sacrificed, who you know like I still to this day have no idea how my mom like did it on her salary. Like,
Yeah.
how did you
Yeah.
afford for me to go to camp and for my brother to have music lessons and for us to have computers and do all these things? Like, because like as you get older, like you have no idea what your parents make when you're a kid. But like I have a little bit of an idea now of like,
Yeah.
I have an idea of the level of education they had and like the
Mm-hmm.
jobs they worked and kind of like what their salaries would have been. So it's like, Dad, how you do it? Like, how did you buy a house on this?
Right.
how did you send me to Catholic school on this? So um that's where the grit really came from and just like being able to see it. Like I
Yeah.
saw people model it. And so it just that just stuck out at me. And so again, responsibility was kind of the word that always stuck out, but it was like I have a responsibility to give them, better than I had.
Yeah. Um, I was talking about this with a guest from a previous episode. Um, and I shared with them how, and you touched on it, that's why I'm bringing it up, about how as you get older, you just have this realized grace for your parents. Like, especially when you get in the age where like you were born for them and you were like, yo, we were growing up together. Like we were literally growing up together. Like, and then there's a sweet part that is we, because we're young and fully dependent, we need them to be a superhero. Now, I'm not trying to push superhero complex on anyone because parents aren't perfect. I get that, but they try their best to be. But because I'm fully dependent on a human, in our eyes as a kid, they can do everything. I mean,
Right.
you know, um, and then as an adult, you just can look back and you're like, yo, shout out to you, and thanks, and I'm still here, and I have really great memories, and I can only imagine, to your point, like understanding where you were, your mindset of a 20 something year old or 30 something year old that you were in to just do it. And so I'm glad that you brought that up because I always think that's such a key thing to reflect back on as an adult, whoever those people were for you. Maybe they were parents, maybe they were mentors, whoever, but you can kind of look back and see like, wow, I see what you were doing, and I probably didn't make it the easiest sometimes, but I see what you were doing, and super grateful. And so you talked about too how there was a large part of you, and this is kind of like where you are now looking back, that with Clark in the picture, you're like, it brought out more. I looked at life different. It brought out something new in me. What about her being here has made you say, like, how do you look at life differently? What has thoroughly changed? Not just, yes, your duties as a father, but like maybe where you thought you were, your frame of mind, your way of thinking was in this direction. And now you're like, wait a minute, I'm starting to think of the world or life like this.
One, I just look at it from the lens of like, one, just the world is crazy, right? Like,
Yeah.
you think about like the stories you hear on the news, like the tragedies that happen, the things that happen in schools, the things that happen to children. And one, that just is just like, oh Lord, like I now have I'm invested in that. Like, not that we aren't
Yeah.
invested in like the global society. And so when things happen, like it's a tragedy for everyone.
Right.
But like it hits harder when you look on the news and you hear about, young girls getting kidnapped and trafficked, or you hear about school shootings and you think, well, like, damn, that could be like my kid is in middle
Yeah.
school. Like they have to go, and it's different when you think about like kids do active shooter drills now. Like we did tornado drills
That's
here
it.
in the Midwest, where it's like go in the
Tornado.
hallway, like bend down,
Yeah.
like that was like the extent of like, training for disaster in the school was like, oh, a tornado could come. And now it's like we've got to monitor social media. Like I had that conversation this year where like my daughter had an incident at her school where her and another student had a negative interaction, and another student like filmed it and put it on social media. And so like I had to intervene in that situation, but it's just like, wow, we're really at that level where like, all these, there's so much access and there's so much information.
Yeah.
And so you think about just like how much more kids know today than what we knew.
Totally.
I had a conversation with my daughter last week. Actually, it was a group conversation, so it was her and like 6 other adults, and she's the child, and
Yeah.
she's like educating adults on people's sexual identities and how they like, what does it mean to be trans, and what does it mean to be
Yes.
pan, and what does it mean to be asexual. And she's 12, and she
Right.
can articulate this like with the skill level of an adult. But just the fact that she has access to that much information
Yeah.
is so different, because we didn't have access to that. Like
Not
we learned,
not at all.
I don't even know that anyone taught us about, identities in that way. We just like
No.
watched TV and was just like, all right, whichever character I like, that's like how I'm going to model myself. And
Right.
that's,
Right.
and that's how you picked it out. So it was like, all right,
That's my definition.
that's my definition, right?
Yeah.
It's just like I watch Power Rangers. Zach is the black one. All right, now I'm gonna just be Zach, because
Right.
it's the easiest thing for me to identify with.
Yes. Yeah.
And now, there's so much content that kids can tap into to identify and figure out who they want to be. And so all of that, and I'm probably trailing off from the original
No.
question.
No.
So
It's totally
circle
fine.
me back if I need to. But yeah, I just think there's so much of that that I'm just always like cognizant of, that I'm
Yeah.
always thinking about.
Yeah.
And I'm really fortunate that like even in the level of maturity that my daughter has, she still has a level of like there's still some innocence there.
Yes.
Which I'm happy that like she hasn't been like totally corrupted by just like the world. Because I think there's also a point where you realize that there's only so much you can do as a parent.
Right.
There's so much influence you can have, but then it hits a point. I think this is the point probably now as she prepares to be, enter into the teenage years, where like your influence is kind of done. So like I hope you did good in the first half,
Yeah.
because now they start making their own decisions and figuring out who they want to be. And they're going to slip up in places and figure and have to figure things out. But I think the weirdest thing about that is that I remember that space so vividly. Like I remember it like it was yesterday.
Right.
I vividly remember 13. And so to now look at it and be like, whoa, what happened to time?
Yeah.
That's the mind trip.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. When you were talking, I'm thinking, well, first of all, my 13th birthday was centered around the group immature. So that will clearly show you the level. And I mean, that was massively reserved. Also,
Right.
we didn't, like, to your point, we just didn't have access. So and not to say that we didn't know what we were doing, but like if it wasn't in an encyclopedia, Google wasn't around to like dig further. That was your limit.
Right.
Um, and the idea of protecting another generation from exposure is almost another identity coming in and of itself, because how do you set boundaries and modify their exposure when it's like constantly there? So that, yeah, I would imagine. And then additionally, um I was thinking, you said in the beginning when you were like, to a degree there was a selfishness, how, in whatever relative term, and I heard that too, is like, I don't have kids, but I would imagine there would be something in my mind that's like, oh, okay, it's truly not about me. Not to say that I can't live my life and do my things, but I know that whatever I do, someone is literally watching and modeling. Like, to your point, when we were looking at television characters and saying like, oh, that's how they're looking at us,
Right. Right.
generation. So it's kind of like more thought goes into each move. But then I'm also thinking, even with you sharing your story, like, and I've thought this prior to this moment, but is there ever, and I don't have the answer to this, but is there ever a moment when you're ready for parenthood, just in general? Because I would venture to say that kids have their own personalities, and you're growing and you're observing theirs and you're nurturing theirs while living your life. And so, yeah, like,
There, truthfully, I think no,
yeah.
and I say that confidently because I think about even how I live presently today, and I'm married now,
Hmm.
and I have a wife, and she doesn't have any children of her own, and we're thinking about family planning and thinking
Hmm.
about like keeping the legacy going, and even in that sense, it's kind of like, but man, I'm not ready, like,
Yeah.
but even at like in my late 30s and having a child already, like still feeling not ready,
Yeah.
and even her as someone who, ready but not ready. Like we're
Hmm.
ready because we have the love and we know that
Totally.
you know, we've got access and information and things that can help guide us on the journey, but like you're
Mhm.
never really ready. Um,
Truly.
it's just it is a day-to-day experience, and the reason you're not ready though is because you've got to get back to the sense that like you're dealing with human beings,
Yes.
and humans are, we're divinely made but uniquely made.
Hmm.
Every one of us is different in so many ways. We've got so many different things about us biologically, psychologically, like,
Hmm.
so even if you were, parent of the year 6 times running before, you
Right.
just never know what's going to happen with that next child
Truly.
because, there's just so many dynamic differences that happen between people. And I always think about that when I even think about like myself and my brother. I have a younger brother
Hmm.
who is like very different from me.
Yeah.
We're very different people, and there are things that I think that he has mastered that I haven't been able to master. So even as I think about all the accomplishments that I may have had professionally or whatever,
Hmm.
and he took a different path, but there are things about him that he's mastered that I haven't been able to do.
Yeah.
So there's just things that, and we're just different people, but
Yeah.
we grew up in the same household, had the same two parents, same
Listen,
blood, but it's just like y'all are, this is one
completely
going this way,
different.
one going that way.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, there's beauty in that, but truly, I'm always just like, as much preparation is good. I think that is necessary. It gets your mind in a position to welcome new things. Then the other part of that is being remaining nimble to the fact that even in your planning to get your mind right, things can shift. And if you're open to being nimble, then there's some level of like grounding in that, like in the ability to be nimble. But you should expect more of that than more of the planning, while knowing the planning is still good. Um, but I wanted to mention that because I'm always like, I feel like there's so many precursors that people want to share with you, like before you do anything, like before you go, are you ready for college? Are you ready for marriage? Are you ready for kids? Are you ready? And it's like, okay, I mean, like, yeah, I'm ready to welcome the opportunity for. That's where you got me.
yeah.
So so truly, I totally identify with that, but it just stuck out. And then, when you think about, I always say one of the best teachers is hindsight, right? Like it's such a gift. Like there's no anxiety tied into hindsight. There's no concern because it's just like it's what it is. I can look back and say like, got it. So what would if as hindsight as a gift or as a teacher, what would you say your biggest lesson is from a moment or a season in your life where you're like, whoo, that was a lot of flexibility that it required of me. And what is the gift now that you're where you are here in this whole new season of life? Um, that you can say, like, when I look back on that moment, here's what I learned about me. Here was the gift.
So there was a quote that I heard recently, and I might be butchering it, but it essentially said that you have already lived through your worst days.
Wow. Yeah.
And when I think about that, I think about like all the times when it was hard, when it was
Mhm.
like it was difficult, you didn't know what to do or what was going to happen. And, you know, you essentially figured out when we talk about that grit, like whatever that grit was in you that allows you to get through it, like
Mhm.
you're still here, they're still here, like people still breathing and people are in good spaces. I think that's the other piece that
Mhm.
really, so when I think about like coming out of that scenario and just kind of everything that was going on in my life at that period, like that time is come and gone, and I've lived through a bunch of other things since then.
Mhm.
And so it's just realizing that like even the bad days, and I still think about this like today because
Yeah.
even today I've had bad days. I had bad days this week.
Right. Right.
And it's, but those days, like you live through them, you've conquered them by whatever means possible. And so just holding on to that, like it's that, like what's that saying, I can do hard things.
Yeah.
Like I can do hard things, and as hard as it gets, just having that faith or whatever you want to call it, that like it'll figure itself out, it'll work itself
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
I think the trick to that is understanding that it may not always figure itself out or work itself out in the way that you think it will, and having the patience
Mhm.
to sit through that and sit in that is the difficult part. I
Yeah.
think that's what makes hard times hard, is because
Yeah.
not no it's not about the time itself being hard, but it's just like how am I going to get through this? And I don't know
Yeah.
how I'm going to get through this. So I just have to live through it.
Mhm.
And I think, and I'm guilty of this myself, is sometimes I sit in it,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
my wife talks to me a lot about this, about like you can't sit in it. Like
Yeah.
you really gotta like move out of it. Like, and it's funny because I'll say, well, I'm doing all these things and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And she's like, yeah, you're doing the actions, but mentally and emotionally you're still sitting in it.
Yeah.
So doing the action is not enough. You've got to like, it's got to be a part of your full self. And so
Yeah.
that's something I'm still trying to master. Like it's like the wisdom, the wisdom that she has imparted upon me, that I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, I hear you, but I'm still trying to figure it out.
Sure.
But I think again, like the grace and the blessing is knowing that like you figured out other stuff before, so
Yep.
you can figure this out as well. Because you know nothing, I don't think anything is insurmountable. Like there are
Yeah.
definitely some big mountains out there.
Yeah.
There's some big mountains that people have to climb, you, and so I never want to diminish that. But I think when you think about the mountain that you're currently trying to climb, it you can get over it, and
Yeah.
just you may not know how, you may not know, which tools you're going to need to get over it,
Right.
because
Right.
every mountain is different. Like
Right.
some you may need a rope, others you may need a hook.
Right.
So it just depends. And so, but as you go through, like the goal is that hopefully like you'll figure it out in that process. And if you surround yourself with good people,
Mhm.
and give yourself the tools, whatever that tool may be for you, whether it's
Yeah.
faith or therapy or exercise or whatever it is,
Mhm.
to arm you, to give you that strength, um, that hopefully that'll be your guide.
Yeah. Yeah. That was so good. That was so good. You have a lot of gems. So I was trying to like put a pin in each one. Um, so yeah, the quote that you shared about like you've been through your worst, and I thought about that, like, have we all? But I think what I loved about what you said is like you with every obstacle that you overcome, it awakens a new skill set to where like, yeah, the first time you did X, Y, and Z, and you were just like, oh, I'm new. That was the hardest point because now you're way more you have way more resources, grit, and understanding and hindsight, where
Yeah.
that will no longer be the hardest thing. And that was really powerful. Like pretty much, like if you allow yourself to be taught in the seasons that you're going through, yeah, that you have gone through your hardest moments. So I love that. Um, and then, without fail, this comes up in every episode, but yeah, that true wisdom about surrounding yourself with the right people. And um for you, why is that important? Why is the circle, the village, that important? And also, if you want to, who are some of those people for you?
Oh wow. So I think the village is important just because you I think the greatest gift that you can have is realizing everything that you don't know.
Yeah.
And again, like when you think about people who, and this isn't, I guess this is not, but I just think of from my perspective because I
Mm-hmm.
grew up around really smart people. Like
Yeah.
all of my friends are really bright people, like
Mm-hmm.
people that I look up to and think like, man, like he's so smart. And so I try to surround myself with people who I feel like are like very like intelligent in the ways that they are. And
Sure.
so it's having that like foresight to know like there's so much that I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but at least if I surround myself with people that know a little bit or know a lot about lots of different things, I always have a resource that I can tap into.
Yeah.
Um, whether that be like, can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
Or can you like can even sometimes can you do this?
Yeah.
Because like, look,
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do this and I need to get can you do this for me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think that's always just been critical because, you know, and you know this, like I know a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
and I know a lot of people on varying levels. Like some people are
Mm-hmm.
associates, some people are like, deep friends, some people are family. I
Yeah.
literally have a ton of people who are not related to me by blood, marriage, anything that I
Mm-hmm.
call family.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because I think about just how important it is to just to have other people, how much human connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, especially like in the last few years, we've, I mean, we back outside now, so it's not as much, but like definitely 2020, 2021, like people were living in isolation and
Yeah.
we had lost a lot of that connection. And even I felt like I lost a lot of connection to people and to people who, you know, yeah, we can talk on text or on Zoom, but like people I used to see every day or every
Mm-hmm.
weekend, you lose that connection. And so just having that village, I mean, you need people. We need that interaction. That's how tradition is passed down.
Yeah.
That's how bonds are formed. That's how you meet people. Like I was outside yesterday and I was joking with someone. I said, I met my wife outside. Like we were at a barbecue. Like that's where we met, like
Mhm.
in communion with people. I was
Right.
with my frat brother. She was with her sorority sisters. Like we were, in communion with people. And that's how we were able
Mhm.
to meet and have that connection. So it's so important to me. And obviously, like, given the career that I work in currently, which is, public relations, is so much about relationships,
Yeah.
so much about connections to people and understanding people. And so, for me, the village should be big. Like I know some people are like no new friends and like to keep the circles tight. And that's great. And I do understand where that comes from. But I also feel like but there's so many people out here who can contribute, and that you can contribute to them. There's so much, information that can be passed and so much, energy and love and joy and happiness that people can
Mhm.
share. Um, that we need to have that.
Yeah,
And I think it's also important for me is that like that doesn't always necessarily have to be like your immediate blood family.
totally.
Um, it's really interesting because I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and our motto is friendship is essential to the soul. And
Mm,
I think about that so deeply because you think about family, you think about friendship, and I've always talked to people in the fraternity about like I have a brother, a blood brother who
hmm.
I didn't choose him, he just showed up one day, and it was like
Yeah,
this is your brother, love him.
right.
And with the fraternity, I've chosen to make you my brother. I've
Hmm.
chosen for you to be my friend. And so when I think about friendship, it's such a deep concept to me. It's a concept I don't take lightly, because I'm making a choice to have you a part of my village, to have you a
Yeah.
part of my life. So friends are always like a really really big part of my world.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people.
Yeah,
And it's so interesting because honestly, I've had that conversation recently. 'Cause someone was talking about like, oh, you really network. And I'm not even an extrovert in my core. Like I can
right,
come off that way, but then I need to come home and take a nap because it took something from me. But
right.
I do leverage the dynamic of networking and creating relationships because as you stated perfectly, like your intelligence and your or I should say your perceived intelligence and the way you can move and not even perceived, your intelligence is so rooted in your ability to connect yourself with great people. I'm the same way. Like I love Drake, but the whole "It's All Me," that is like one song that honestly like grinds my gears because I think so many people have that ingrained in their mind. Like I did this, and I get there's a myriad of reasons why that can feel that way. So I don't want to belittle that feeling for someone, but truly like who you choose to connect with, your humility and saying like, I don't need to be the best at everything. I just need to have people in my village who are good at what they do.
Yep.
Um, there's something in that humility that's genius and that makes you more intelligent. Like your EQ and IQ is actually higher because it's like when something needs to be done, I can get it done. It doesn't have to be all me, but I can get it done because of my connections and network. And so yeah, I bring that up only because there's not one episode to date, almost in every season, where the concept of village does not come up. And so it's almost been a core part of each guest because without my prompting, they're gonna go into some form of the village mentality. And I really I value the village mentality really strong. And even when I'm talking to other places, I bring it up because especially moments you didn't see coming, there's some form of a net when you have a village. It may not be financial or it might be financial. It may be just wisdom. It's people rallying around you to say, like, oh, you got this, you cool, what you need. It
Yep.
makes those moments seem less traumatic. And I realize that not everybody is the afforded a organic village at times. And I realize that people are learning even in their big age, like, oh, this is how I, procure a village. But I can't stress enough how important that really, really is. So
And you just never know where people will come from
totally.
in scenarios, right? Again, like when I became a father, I then immediately like found a connection with people, friends of mine. I mean, who may have been like friends or associates or kind of
Mhm.
like adjacent, but they were fathers. And so
Yeah,
now I have that connection with them where it's like deeper because now I have someone I can talk to about it,
yeah,
and that was much different than talking to family or whatever like that, because it's like I'm talking to one of my contemporaries who's like, yeah, man, like same thing happened to me,
yeah.
I'm in the same scenario, like here's how I figured out, co-parenting. Here's
Mhm,
how I figured out, traveling back and forth and still being involved. Here's how I figured out how to, discipline,
mhm,
and here's
mhm.
how I figured out to make my presence known. Here's how I figured out to, you know, integrate my family as a part of this. Like things that like this person who like I may have known you before, but I knew you as a like, hey, what's going on,
Right.
passing by. And now we're like attached at the hip because
Yeah.
there's so much that I can learn from you. And I just who would have known that you would have been that person in my life. And so I'm also thankful for like, my homeboys, but even like I had a lot of women friends, female friends, women, female, women,
Totally.
um, who also had children, and had children in different situations, who became really crucial because it helped me understand that dynamic. It helped me
Hmm.
put myself in the places of my daughter's mother to figure out, okay, well, here's what she's going through.
Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of empathy in terms of the situation to figure out, okay, how can I show up better? How
Hmm.
can I show up in a way that makes this dynamic work? And I've been blessed that, like my co-parenting situation has been, pretty good. Like,
Yeah.
it hasn't been without bumps. Like wasn't perfect, but like it's been pretty good. And I think it's been pretty good because I've been able again to tap into that village. And
Yeah.
so when one of my homegirls has a child and she's talking to me about her baby daddy or her child's
Hmm.
father or whatever, and like what she's going through, I'm like, oh man, like I never thought about it from that
Hmm.
perspective because I'm only seeing my perspective.
Right.
So like that just really helped that dynamic. And so again, but you would have never known who those people would have been,
Totally.
you know, um, and how they would have shown up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely. Like even people you feel like now and you meet them now and they become those people for you like years from now. It's crazy. And then I think one thing that you said that I think is worth calling out even a little bit further and leaning into is that you had the awareness, the humility and the wisdom to see another perspective. Because I think the reason why I think it's important to call that out is because I think a lot of us have great people around us and we're not coachable and we feel like we have to figure it out by ourselves, and we're not willing to listen or see another perspective. So a large part of you being able to leverage your network was your ability to see the value in that. Hey, there's something I can learn from you, and I'm seeking out your perspective in order to have greater perspective for me. So that's not something that comes by breathing. That's something that you have to be aware and open to. And so I would hope that those who are listening in either similar situations or just moments again that were surprising, that's the posture you need to kind of take on. Like for you in those moments is to be
yeah,
coachable, open, willing, um, and to seek out support, or I'll even venture to say it further and to allow support because some of us just don't want to accept it, and that's I might have been one of those people at a time, but
yeah. No, I was definitely one of those people. I fell on my butt. A lot of times I fell on the sword a few times to be able to get the lesson and to
mhm,
understand that like you got to talk to somebody else. You got to figure you don't have the answers. Like you don't know
right,
the answers, Sway. But like I had to, you know, take a few of those bumps and bruises to like figure it out to
yeah,
or at least enough to figure out that like you got to go to another source.
yeah,
So it's it wasn't me. Like I wasn't just this perfect person. Like had a lot of flaws. I had a lot of
mhm,
flaws
mhm,
that I had to work through.
sure,
A lot of flaws that sat in me for a really long time because you know you don't pay attention to those signs, or so it's like you brush them off and you keep doing it. You're like, well, this is working for me, so I'm gonna just keep doing this.
mhm,
That works for a period of time, but then there's
yeah,
gonna come a moment where like that don't work no more.
right,
Like
right,
you gotta find a different gear. You gotta find,
mhm,
a different lever to pull. And I was just lucky that there were some people who were around to at least show me the example to be like, look at it this way, or like,
mhm. Thanks for sharing that, Brian, because what I'm hoping that listeners do hear in this is not just your experience and not just the way you handled it, but your posture throughout the whole thing. And of course, none of us have arrived and none of us have gotten where we are flawless, because that's a lie in and of itself. But the willingness to just share, like, yo, this is why you need a village. This is why you need to listen. This is why you need to ask questions and accept help. And that's a hurdle for people for so many life reasons. But I hope that people heard that part of you that you shared. So I really, really appreciate that. Um, and I just have to add for those who don't know, like Brian is truly a master at the art of of public relations, but not just in the, not like the marketing definition. What I when I moved to Chicago, I was able to work with Brian on a lot of projects for work. And one thing that was very just amazing for me to see is truly his leverage of his village. Like I thought I networked well. I really did. But watching Brian, like Brian would be like, oh no, I have a frat brother here. Oh yeah, let me call this person from Morehouse. Oh, I met this person yesterday at this event. And I was like, snap. And it made me want to step my networking game up and seeing that, because I was like, dang, he's just out here getting business. And that was really, really, really great. And then I think it was the true essence of PR. Like whatever the, Oxford definition is now, I'm sure it's reflective of that, but not just the word public relations, but you said it earlier, like 5 minutes in, that it's truly building relationships, and you do that very, very well. And if you don't, I don't remember if we did we say we can share your handles on social?
I got a few handles that I can share. Yeah,
Okay.
For the most part, my social media is mostly just like you. People,
Okay.
like people I know, but I've got a few public ones. Yeah, I've got some
here's what we will say. If on this topic of how he does know how to, he has that grit, and he is truly a true practitioner of public relations, definitely link up on LinkedIn, because I only want to say that because it's you just seeing how you post and how you write is a clear definition that, like, oh, he gets it. He connects the dots for sure under Brian Packer. And I don't know if there's any other platforms, not that you have to, but I am giving you a clear, like, this is the person who knows how to do it well.
So it's funny because I guess the thing that, and I guess this is like my cheat code for what you may want to call PR, but it's really just about like connecting with people, is that I try to like, be, and I don't, and this is a very like cliche term, like being an empath. So I don't consider myself an empath, but I think I recognize people with good energy. And when you recognize that, I try to at least hone in on something that is unique about them, so that the next time that we have an interaction, even if they don't remember me, I can trigger something in them to at least let them know that we've had an interaction, because they remember this unique thing about whatever I said or whatever it was. And that could be, like, oh, you went to Michigan State, or it could be, oh, you're an AKA, or, or whatever, something about your kids, something about your siblings. Like, and it's not always like something super deep, but it's just like, I remember just a little piece of a nugget. And the next time that I run into you, I can use that as a trigger to like do this reconnection. Because the other thing that I don't like that people do, and I do it sometimes too, is that we all know that like there's a bunch of people that we like stalk on social media, or like we follow them, or we see what they're doing, and we kind of know what their lives are about. And we may follow each other, but then when we see each other in public, people act like they don't know you. It's like, I know you know me because you watch all my stories.
You just commented yesterday.
Like, you just commented, but now you act like I don't know you in person, like, which is a weird thing. But I think to kind of help break some of that down and break down some of that awkwardness is just to be like, oh, hey, like, like, I had a kids doing it baseball this year. Like, I saw your son was, made the team. And it's like, that little thing, I think, triggers people to just open up a little bit more. And so when you consistently do that over time, there are people in Chicago who I only see you outside. Right. I only see you at like a festival or a party or something like that. And we don't really even have like a true tight connection. But every time you see them, it's like they show love. They want to check your hand, give you a hug, ask you how things are going. And it's like, but they just do that because you share that energy. And I think what happens over time is that at some point you're going to hit at least in my professional career, I've hit points where it's like, hey, I know someone that like does this or has this random connection. And so when I'm able to reach out to them, they're like so much more responsive and so much more like, oh yeah, like let's talk or let's do something. And so like that really has been like part of the cheat code and just doing that over and over again. And it can be taxing to a certain extent because you are keeping a lot of information about people in your head.
Totally.
But I'm so driven by people.
Yes.
I'm so driven by like understanding like who people are, where they come from, like what makes them tick, that for me it just comes really naturally. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that translates into kind of the work, because then there's so many other points in time. And then if you do that with people who are in your industry, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that with a reporter or a blogger or a producer, like, then that becomes a natural progression.
Yeah.
And I had someone at work tell me that earlier this year, because I was doing something for work. I was at an event, and all these people were coming through, and they were like members of the media, and I was dapping people up and giving people hugs, and I got a
Right.
kid, and they're like just like, are you friends with all these people? I was like,
Right.
yeah, I am. I mean, like, yes, they are
Yeah.
media and reporters, but they're also like, I consider them friends. I consider them
Yeah.
people who, I genuinely enjoy spending time around. And so when I ask them to do things, they will do things for me, but
Mm-hmm. Because you
because it's
build that
mutually
relationship.
beneficial. Yeah. But
Yeah.
we've got that relationship. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, in ministry, because that's where the space I'm in, what the part of what you said that was super powerful that we talk about a lot is you basically are seeing people, right? It's like not just for the benefit for you, but to your point, it's mutually beneficial. And so it's like, hey, I see you, I know to ask about your kid's baseball game. I see you, I know to ask how was your trip. And I may have saw your trip on Instagram, but I know that when I see you, I can call that out because I'm paying attention. And then
Yep.
you said it best that you care about people. It's funny because whenever I interview for roles in our industry, I always ask what draws them to this industry. And I guess this is a cheat code for anybody who will ever interview with me, but I'm always looking for them to say something along the lines of they love people, they love to learn about people. Because if that's not for you, that you'll be over this in 18 months, this whole job, because something has to drive you about people, because that's what
Yep.
you're doing with, you're solving people's problems. So um thank you so much for sharing all of that. That has been amazing. And I cannot end this episode without the moment of levity that I ask every guest in this season. I am asking all my guests to share a character from a television show or a book where you admired their story, or you were rooting for them in their arc of, whatever was going on with their character, and how they pulled through, or why you were rooting for them. What makes them your favorite?
Yeah. So this was hard for me. Because I watch a lot of TV. I don't read as many books. I should be better, but I read a lot. But I
Yeah.
watch a lot of television. I watch a lot of film, because that's just my thing. And pop culture is like my jam. If you can't see behind me, this collection of Funko Pops that I have,
I was gonna ask
which,
you.
yeah, which you've seen it kind of grow from
Mhm.
the beginning, from the impetus. And so pop culture is always something. And I was like, okay, who from pop culture? Who can I find? What can it be? Um, and in my nerdy self, who I came up with, not necessarily my favorite character,
Sure.
but just their story arc, I think is really perfect for this conversation. And it's Harry Potter.
Oh yeah.
And I love Harry Potter. I haven't read the books. I know that's like a cardinal sin, but I love
That
all the
is it.
films. I'm like a huge. I used to dress up like Harry Potter and go to movies like I'm that person.
Yeah.
But the thing that I love so much about Harry and his story arc is, he experienced really great trauma as a child.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, out of that, really didn't know who he was, but he found who he was not necessarily through his biological family, but through the
Yeah.
family and the community that he created at
Yeah.
Hogwarts. And so, again, when you talk about that village, and you talk about that community, and you talk about friendship, I just really, really enjoyed the story arc of how, you know, Harry didn't have a family, like,
Mhm.
really at the beginning of the movie. He had like his aunt and uncles who were like really mean to
Word.
him.
Yeah.
But he gained so much family, whether it was like the Weasley family or Hermione, or all of these. And I know I'm going through the characters, so if you don't know the
His
characters,
house.
sorry.
Yeah.
But even as you think about people like Snape, right? Who,
Mhm.
if you haven't seen the movies, I guess this is a
Yeah. This is
spoiler
your time. Go
alert, but
watch.
like,
You have time.
Yeah, but you find out Snape, who like through the whole arc of the story you thought was like his enemy,
Right.
who really ended up being his protector throughout this whole process. And
Yeah.
so I just really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed again like that sense of like he really found himself when he found his tribe.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so it was that whole moment was like, you know, something is different about you, but you don't know what it is. But you figure that out when you find the people who are in that same space that you're in. So when
Yeah.
he found the other wizards, he found, this is my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what I'm here to do. And regardless of, and I think the other thing is the humility that he had throughout the process, because everyone kept being like, well, you're the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one. And like there was to a certain degree he was the chosen one, but like
Yeah.
in the end, it took everyone. It took the whole school. It took all his
Totally.
friends. It took Neville Longbottom. Like it took all of them to really defeat this great, you know, defeat Voldemort and do all those things. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Harry in his story arc and how he grew, and he found love at Hogwarts. He
Yeah.
found, you know, his future wife, and then his the next generation all kind of came through that village. It was really dope to me.
Yeah. That was a perfect character to choose for this episode. Truly it has been. I was late to watch all the movies. I think I did it last year, like the full thing.
Oh wow.
So I know. So sorry to everybody out there. I was probably too hemmed up in Twilight and Jurassic Park, but I did make it happen. Um, so yeah, I love that. Everything you said was spot on, and you can see a lot of what we shared about today in his story. So great decision. Okay, Packer, thank you so much for being a guest today on this
Thank you.
episode.
Thank you.
So much wisdom, and we talked about the importance of, caring about people, letting people letting people be the driver, and seeing people. And my hope and prayer for this episode is that people who listen, and I always tell people, I never know who listens to these episodes. Sometimes I'll get emails from people in other countries, somewhere far west. So my hope is that this lands on people who may be going through a similar situation or a similar mindset of like, wow, I need to turn on my grit. I need to leverage my village. I need to learn from, whatever that moment was, and be open to it. I'm hoping that they grabbed all those gems that you shared today. And that they feel seen to know like there's the other side, and it's so much greater. And as Brian shared earlier, like you've already been through your worst. You are equipped with the resources to get you where you need to go if your posture is open to humility, learning, and fortitude. So all of those things were super great. Appreciate you. Thank you for being on this episode. And for everyone else, we will see you back on the podcast with more episodes of Paige for My Book. Have a great week.
Thanks for having me.